There are moments in every person's life when the world feels heavy, when the body is tired, the mind is weary, and the heart feels empty. We try to hold everything together, but sometimes it seems like our strength is slipping away little by little. Perhaps it's an illness that drains our energy. Perhaps it's a disappointment that leaves a scar on the soul. Or maybe it's simply the long days of struggle, responsibility, and worry that make us whisper to ourselves, "I can't do this anymore." And yet, even in that darkness, there remains a quiet light, a small voice that whispers, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. This voice, so gentle and steady, invites us to draw closer to the source of all strength, God Himself. This prayer, "Lord, in my weakness of body and my weary spirit, I come to you, my strength and my hope," is not just a simple request. It is a confession of the human condition and a declaration of faith. It's an acknowledgement that we are limited, but God is not. It is a turning point. When we stop fighting alone and begin to lean on the one who never grows tired, who never abandons, and who understands every pain we cannot express in words. So often, we are taught that strength means never showing weakness, never crying, never faltering. The world tells us to stay strong, to stand tall, to never admit defeat. But God teaches something far deeper. That true strength is not the absence of weakness, but the presence of faith. It is not found in what we can endure by ourselves, but in how deeply we can trust Him when we can no longer stand on our own. When we pray, "Lord, give me strength," we are not asking to become superheroes or to carry the world on our backs. We are asking for divine companionship in our struggles. That God would walk beside us, lifting the burdens we cannot lift alone. In that moment of surrender, something miraculous happens. Peace begins to return to the heart. The fear that once filled us starts to fade. And though the storm may still rage around us, inside we begin to feel calm, because we know we are not alone. Think about the times in your life when you felt broken or helpless. And yet, somehow, you made it through. Perhaps you didn't even realize it then, but that quiet endurance, that strength to keep going, was not yours alone. It was grace, God's strength working silently within you. He does not always remove the trial, but He gives you the courage to face it, the patience to endure it, and the faith to grow through it. When we whisper this prayer in moments of exhaustion, we are doing something sacred. We are bringing our pain to the altar of love. We are telling God, "Here I am, Lord. I have no more strength left in me, but I know you are my strength. Help me to stand again." And when we do that, when we hand over our weakness, God fills that emptiness with Himself. It is often in our weakest moments that we see God's power most clearly. The Apostle Paul wrote, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12:9. It's a verse that reminds us that God's glory doesn't shine brightest through our perfection, but through our brokenness, through the cracks where His light can enter. Sometimes, we resist this truth. We want to be strong for others, for our family, for our children, for our friends. We think, if I fall apart, everything else will too. But the truth is, even in our tears, even in our silence, God is still working. He is shaping our hearts, deepening our faith, teaching us that His grace is greater than our weakness. And so the prayer, "Give me the strength to bear this suffering with patience," is not a cry of despair. It is a song of trust. It is saying, Lord, I will keep walking, even if it's slow. I will keep believing, even when I cannot see the way ahead. I will keep trusting that your plan, though mysterious, is filled with love. That is what it means to have strength through faith. Patience in suffering does not mean pretending everything is fine. It means knowing that even pain has a purpose when placed in God's hands. It means believing that every tear is seen, every struggle is noticed, and that someday, in God's perfect timing, all things will be made right. As we begin this reflection, let your heart rest. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to fix everything right now. What you need most is to simply come before God as you are, weary, honest, and open. Whisper this prayer from the depths of your soul and believe that the Lord hears it. He does not turn away from the weak. He embraces them. So tonight, or whenever you feel tired of life's endless demands, find a quiet moment to breathe and say, Lord, in my weakness, I come to you. You are my strength and my hope. Let those words sink into your soul. Let them become your heartbeat. Because the truth is, you are never truly weak when you are held in God's hands. He gives strength to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases power. Isaiah 40:29. His love renews, his grace sustains, and his spirit gives us courage for every battle. And when the day feels too long, when the load feels too heavy, remember, you do not walk alone. God walks beside you, step by step, even when you cannot feel him. His silence is not absence, it is invitation. An invitation to trust deeper, to believe stronger, to rest longer in his arms. This prayer, though simple, holds a great mystery. That the more we surrender, the stronger we become. The more we trust, the lighter our burdens feel. And the more we open our hearts to God, the more we discover that his strength has always been there, waiting for us to lean on it. So as you listen, as you pray, as you reflect on these words, may your heart be lifted, may your fears soften, and may your soul begin to feel the quiet power of divine strength flowing once more within you. Because with God, even weakness becomes a doorway to grace. And when you can't carry the weight any longer, he will carry you. Lord, in my weakness of body and my weary spirit, there are days when even breathing feels heavy. Days when the body aches and the heart carries invisible bruises. When we reach that point of exhaustion, when strength seems gone and hope feels distant, the words of this prayer become more than a sentence. They become a lifeline. Lord, in my weakness of body and my weary spirit. Every human being, no matter how strong or faithful, eventually faces weakness. It may come through illness, old age, emotional pain, failure, or spiritual dryness. But weakness itself is not a sign of failure. It is part of what makes us human. And more than that, it is the sacred space where God's power begins to work. The Apostle Paul knew this truth well. In 2 Corinthians 12, God said to him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul had prayed for his pain to be removed, yet God's answer was not deliverance, but presence. It was as if God whispered, "Paul, you don't need to be strong on your own. You only need to let me be your strength." And that, dear listener, is the secret hidden inside our struggles. When we finally admit that we cannot carry the weight alone, when we let the tears fall and whisper, "Lord, I'm tired," that's when God steps in, not to shame us, but to hold us. We live in a world that celebrates power and perfection. Society teaches us to hide our weaknesses, to always appear confident, successful, independent. But the gospel invites us to do the opposite, to bring our weakness before God, openly and honestly. Because in His presence, weakness is not a curse. It's a doorway to grace. When you pray these words, imagine yourself kneeling before God, your heart open. You don't need to have elegant words or perfect faith, just sincerity. Say to Him, "Lord, my body is tired, my heart is weary, my mind is clouded. But I come to you because I know you are my strength." That prayer, simple as it sounds, moves heaven. There's something deeply freeing about admitting we are weak. It breaks pride, it softens the heart, and it makes space for God to enter. Sometimes we think strength means pretending everything is fine. But true strength means being real before God, because He already knows what we're going through. Remember Elijah, the prophet of fire and miracles? After great victories, he fled to the wilderness, collapsed under a tree, and prayed, "It is enough, Lord. Take my life." He had reached the end of himself, but God did not rebuke him. Instead, He sent an angel to feed him, to let him rest, to gently remind him, "The journey is too much for you alone." God knows the limits of our hearts and bodies. He doesn't expect us to carry life's burdens without rest. That's why Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. Rest doesn't mean laziness or escape. It means trusting that we can stop fighting for a moment, because God is still working on our behalf. Sometimes we confuse weakness with worthlessness. We think, if I am weak, I am failing God. But that is not true. God doesn't love us less when we are weak. In fact, He draws even closer. Psalm 34 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." So, if today you feel weary, physically, mentally, or spiritually, let this prayer become your breath. Lord, in my weakness of body and my weary spirit, I come to you. Let those words remind you that it's okay to rest. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel lost. Because when we reach the end of ourselves, we reach the beginning of His strength. Think of it this way. A child who is exhausted doesn't need instructions. They need a father's arms. They don't need to prove anything. They just need to be held. And God, our Father, is always ready to hold us when we fall. He never says, "Be stronger." He says, "Let me be your strength." Our culture teaches self-reliance. Christ teaches holy dependence. Self-reliance says, "I can do this." Faith says, "I can't, but God can." And that shift in mindset changes everything. It brings peace where there was anxiety, hope where there was despair, and patience where there was pain. There will be seasons when you feel distant from God, when prayer feels dry and your spirit feels worn. But even then, your weakness is not wasted. It's forming humility. It's deepening your compassion. It's teaching you to lean not on your own understanding, but on His promises. When your body is weak, remember, your soul can still be strong. When your spirit is weary, remember, God's Spirit within you never runs out of power. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine laying your burdens at the feet of Christ. Your worries, your pain, your exhaustion. See Him gently reaching out, not with judgment, but with love. Hear Him say, "My child, I am here. You don't need to be strong for me. Just be still and let me fill you again." That is what this first line of the prayer invites us into. Not an act of defeat, but of divine trust. The kind of trust that says, "Even when I am weak, I will not give up, because I know you are near." So the next time your heart feels weary, don't fight against it. Instead, whisper this prayer. Turn your weakness into worship. Turn your exhaustion into surrender. And you will find, as countless saints and believers before you have found, that God's strength is not a faraway promise. It is a present reality, living in you. Because the truth is simple yet powerful. When you can no longer stand, God stands for you. I come to you, my strength and my hope. After acknowledging our weakness, the next line of the prayer leads us to a movement of the heart, a turning point. I come to you, my strength and my hope. This phrase is a declaration of faith, a step out of despair into trust. It reminds us that the answer to human weakness is not found in our own willpower, but in drawing near to God. To come to God means to make a conscious choice, to turn away from the noise, the self-reliance, the pride, and to approach the one who alone can restore us. When we say, I come to you, we are doing something sacred. We are surrendering the illusion that we can save ourselves. There is a deep peace that flows from this surrender. Because when we come to God, we come home. We return to the very source of our being, the one who created us, sustains us, and loves us beyond measure. Psalm 46 says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Notice those words, refuge and present help. God is not a distant observer, He is a close protector. When storms rage around us, He becomes our shelter. When our hearts tremble, He becomes our courage. Think of how the psalmist often begins with distress, but ends with hope. In Psalm 42 he cries, Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? But then he answers his own despair. Hope in God, for I shall again praise Him, my salvation and my God. That is what faith does. It turns inward pain into upward prayer. When we come to God as our strength and hope, we are not pretending everything is okay. We are acknowledging that even when everything is falling apart, He still remains the center that holds. Hope in God does not deny the storm. It anchors us within it. Every person who has walked with God has known this truth, that the moment you turn your heart toward Him, you are no longer alone. Think of Peter, who began to sink beneath the waves when he took his eyes off Jesus. The moment he cried out, Lord, save me, Jesus reached out His hand immediately. That single moment of turning toward Christ changed everything. So many of us spend our days searching for strength in the wrong places, in control, in success, in people's approval, in distractions that only numb the pain for a while. But all of these things fade. When life crumbles, only one foundation remains unshakable: the love and power of God. When you whisper, I come to you, my strength and my hope, you are declaring to your soul that you will no longer look to temporary solutions. You are choosing the eternal. You are choosing the one who knows the path when you cannot see the road ahead. To come to God is also to admit that we need Him daily, not just in emergencies. Many people turn to prayer only when everything goes wrong. But a heart that truly trusts learns to come to God in every moment, in joy and sorrow, in abundance and in lack. Because the closer you walk with Him, the stronger you become. Let's imagine a moment. You wake up one morning and life feels too heavy. You're not sure how to face another day. But instead of scrolling through your phone or drowning in worry, you stop and pray, Lord, I come to you. You pause. You breathe. And in that stillness, something shifts. You remember you are not alone. You feel His peace gently touch your heart. That's what it means to live with God as your strength and hope. It's not about avoiding problems. but about facing them with divine companionship. The prophet Isaiah wrote, "Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles." That renewal does not happen in a single moment. It happens every time we come to Him. Every time we pray, every time we trust, every time we refuse to give up. Hope is not a passive feeling. It is an active faith, a daily returning, a daily coming back to God. To come to God also means to bring everything, not just our best, but our worst. Our doubts, fears, disappointments, sins, and confusion. God doesn't ask us to come polished and perfect. He says, "Come as you are," because it's only when we come honestly that He can heal what's truly broken. There's a story of a young man who said to a priest, "Father, I stopped praying because I'm too weak. I keep failing." The priest smiled and said, "Then now is the perfect time to pray, because you finally understand what prayer is. Not a performance, but a relationship." That is the essence of these words. I come to you. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. And when we add, "my strength and my hope," we are proclaiming something powerful. That our lives are not anchored in what we can see, but in the God who sees beyond what we cannot. Strength and hope are not things we create. They are gifts we receive when we stay close to Him. God does not promise that life will be free of pain, but He does promise that His strength will be enough, and His hope will never run out. So, in your weakest moments, whisper it again. Lord, I come to you, my strength and my hope. Let that be your song when life feels uncertain. Let it be your prayer when your spirit is weary. Because when you come to Him, even the smallest act of faith opens the door to infinite grace. And through that grace, your weakness becomes the place where His strength is revealed, and your despair becomes the seedbed of new hope. For in the arms of God, you will find that what you thought was the end is really the beginning of renewal, peace, and quiet courage to face each day anew. Give me the strength to bear this suffering with patience. There are few prayers more honest, more human than this one. When we say, "Give me the strength to bear this suffering with patience," we are admitting something that most of us try to hide. That pain is real, and it is often more than we can handle on our own. We all experience suffering. It comes in many forms: physical illness, emotional wounds, the loss of someone we love, disappointment, loneliness, or even the silent struggles of the heart that no one else sees. And yet, this prayer reminds us that even in suffering, there can be grace. Not because the pain itself is good, but because God can bring goodness out of it. Patience in suffering does not mean pretending the pain doesn't hurt. It means facing it with a quiet strength that comes from faith. It means saying, "Lord, I don't understand why this is happening, but I trust that you are with me." James 1:2-4 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." Those words sound difficult, even unreasonable, when we are in the middle of suffering. How can we find joy in pain? Yet the message is not to enjoy suffering itself, but to recognize that every trial is shaping something deeper in us. Endurance, faith, compassion, and the ability to love even when life hurts. When we ask God for strength, we often expect Him to remove our burdens. But sometimes, instead of taking the weight away, He gives us stronger shoulders. He gives us the grace to bear what once felt unbearable. And that strength doesn't come from willpower. It comes from His Spirit living within us. Think of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. As he faced the agony of the cross, he prayed, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Even Jesus, the Son of God, felt the weight of suffering. Yet his patience and surrender transformed that suffering into salvation for all humanity. When we suffer, we are not abandoned. We are being invited to share in that same mystery of love. A love that endures, forgives, and trusts even in the darkness. Every tear, every sleepless night, every silent prayer whispered through pain is known to God. And not one of them is wasted. In moments of hardship, patience becomes a sacred form of courage. It's not about waiting passively, but trusting actively, believing that God is still working, even when nothing seems to change. It's the patience of a seed buried in the soil, unseen, yet preparing to break into life. There's a quiet story that illustrates this beautifully. A woman once asked God to remove the thorns from her path because they were hurting her feet. But God answered, "My child, if I remove every thorn, you will never learn to walk carefully with me." The thorns remained, but she began to notice that with each careful step, her faith grew stronger. Eventually, what she once feared became her teacher, guiding her closer to God. That's the heart of this prayer. When we ask for strength to bear suffering with patience, we're not asking for a life without pain, but for the grace to walk through it without losing faith. Suffering, when joined to faith, becomes something holy. It purifies us. It humbles us. It makes us gentler toward others who suffer. And most importantly, it unites us more deeply with Christ, who suffered for us out of love. Think about how often pain has changed people in ways that comfort never could. A parent who learns compassion through the illness of a child. A person who becomes more humble after failure. Someone who begins to value love more deeply after losing what they took for granted. These moments are painful, yes, but they awaken the soul. They make us real. Romans 5 says, "We also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope." This is not a call to seek pain, but to let pain produce something lasting in us. A strength rooted in grace, not in pride. And sometimes, patience means simply holding on. When you have no words left, no answers, no strength, just whisper, "Lord, help me bear this with you." Even that small prayer is powerful, because it places your pain in His hands. If you are in the middle of a trial right now, take comfort in this. God has not forgotten you. He is not punishing you. He is preparing you. The road may be hard, but He walks beside you every step of the way. There will come a day when you will look back and see that the moments that hurt the most were the ones that shaped you the most. The times when your faith grew roots, when your heart learned to depend on grace, and when you began to understand that patience is not weakness, but quiet strength. So, as you pray these words, "Give me the strength to bear this suffering with patience," know that you are speaking directly into the heart of God. He hears every sigh, every tear, every whispered plea for help. And though His answers may not always come in the way we expect, His presence is constant and His love unshakable. Let that love carry you. Let it hold you in your sleepless nights and your heavy days. Trust that the same hands that carried the cross now carry you. And remember, this prayer is not just about enduring suffering, it's about being transformed by it. Because in the end, patience in pain becomes praise. And suffering, when surrendered to God, becomes the soil where miracles grow. Give me the confidence that all things are in your loving will. There are moments in life when the heart cries out, "Why, Lord?" When we lose someone we love, when a dream we cherished slips away, when the path we thought was straight suddenly twists into darkness. In those moments, faith is tested, not in the sunshine of joy, but in the shadows of confusion. That is why this part of the prayer is so powerful. Give me the confidence that all things are in your loving will. It is not a statement of perfect understanding. It is a plea for trust, for the peace that comes not from knowing all the answers, but from knowing the one who holds the answers. There's a great mystery in the will of God. We cannot always see its design, but we can believe in its goodness. Romans 8:28 says, "We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who are called according to His purpose." Notice the words "in all things," not just in joy, not just in success, but even in sorrow, even in loss, even in the silence where God seems far away. His love is still at work. But trusting this truth is not easy. It requires a deep surrender, the kind that only grows through faith. It means saying, "Lord, even when I cannot see what you're doing, I choose to believe that you are doing something good." Faith is not blind optimism. It doesn't deny pain. It simply believes that beyond what we see, there is meaning. That even the broken pieces of our lives can be woven by divine hands into something beautiful. Consider Joseph in the Old Testament. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, thrown into prison. His life looked like a chain of cruel misfortunes. And yet, years later, when he stood as ruler of Egypt and saved his family from famine, he said to his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." That is what happens when faith endures. It turns pain into purpose. When we ask God for confidence in His loving will, we are asking for something very sacred, the grace to trust that every event in our lives, whether joyful or sorrowful, has been allowed by His wisdom and guided by His love. It does not mean that God causes our pain. Rather, He allows human freedom and the brokenness of the world. But His love is so powerful that it can transform even suffering into redemption. There is a saying, "God writes straight with crooked lines." We may not understand the pattern now, but someday, when we look back from the other side of eternity, we will see how every detour, every loss, every unanswered prayer led us closer to His heart. Think of a child in a doctor's office, crying as a wound is cleaned. The child cannot comprehend why the parent allows the pain. But the parent knows that the pain is necessary for healing. In the same way, when we suffer, God's heart aches with us. But He also sees the greater purpose beyond the moment. He knows that healing often begins in the places that hurt the most. When you pray, "Give me the confidence that all things are in your loving will," you are saying, "Lord, help me rest in you even when I don't understand you." That kind of trust is one of the highest forms of worship. Because to believe in God's goodness when everything seems good is natural. But to believe in His goodness when everything hurts, that is faith at its purest. Mary, the mother of Jesus, lived this prayer. When the angel told her she would bear the Son of God, she didn't understand how it could be. Yet she said, "Let it be done to me according to your word." Years later, she would stand at the foot of the cross, watching her son suffer. And once again, she silently trusted that even this was part of God's loving will. There is something sacred about saying yes to God, even when we don't see the full picture. That yes transforms pain into peace. It turns despair into surrender. Trusting God's will doesn't mean we stop feeling grief or confusion. It means we choose not to be ruled by them. We choose to believe that beyond every tear, there is divine mercy waiting to bloom. Sometimes this confidence begins small, just a whisper of faith. And that's enough. God does not demand perfect trust. He simply asks us to keep turning toward Him. Even if your heart can only say, "Lord, help me trust you," that's already a prayer He treasures. If you've ever walked through loss, you know how fragile faith can feel. But in that fragility, God is still near. Psalm 37 says, "Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him, and He will act." That promise is not empty. It is the anchor of every believer who has ever dared to trust when life made no sense. There may be times when His plan feels hidden behind silence. But silence is not absence. It's the space where faith grows roots. It's in those quiet hours, when we have no strength left to reason or argue, that our souls learn to simply rest. And slowly, over time, confidence begins to rise. Not the confidence that everything will go our way, but the confidence that whatever happens, God's love will never fail. So tonight, or whenever you feel lost in the maze of life, pray these words softly. Lord, give me the confidence that all things are in your loving will. Let those words settle in your soul. Breathe them in. Let them remind you that nothing is wasted, nothing is random, nothing is outside the reach of His compassion. Because even when life feels uncertain, love never is. And when you can't see His hand, you can still trust His heart. The connection between strength and surrender. Strength and surrender, two words that seem to live in opposite worlds. When we hear strength, we imagine standing tall, unshaken, powerful. When we hear surrender, we think of letting go, giving up, yielding. But in the language of faith, these two are not enemies. They are companions. One cannot exist without the other. When you pray, "Lord, in my weakness of body and my weary spirit, give me the strength to bear this suffering with patience," you are not asking to become invincible. You are asking for divine strength, the kind that only grows in the soil of surrender. The world tells us that strong people never fall, never cry, never admit defeat. But the gospel teaches the opposite. Jesus Himself, the Son of God, wept at Lazarus' tomb, sweated blood in Gethsemane, and on the cross whispered, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Was He weak? No. In that surrender, He revealed the greatest strength the world has ever seen. True strength is not the absence of tears. It is the courage to cry in God's presence. True surrender is not giving up on life. It is giving in to love. When we surrender, we stop fighting God's plan and start flowing with His grace. It's like a swimmer who stops thrashing against the current and learns to float, letting the water carry them. The river does not weaken them. It supports them. So too, God's will does not crush us. It sustains us. Surrender is not passivity. It's cooperation. It's saying, "Lord, I will do my best, but I trust you with the rest." It's working faithfully and praying constantly while remembering that outcomes belong to God. Let's take the example of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He knew what awaited Him: betrayal, pain, and death. He prayed, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." That was honest humanity speaking. But then came the sacred words of surrender. "Yet not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22:42. That single sentence changed history. Because through surrender came redemption. Through obedience came resurrection. It teaches us something profound, that strength does not come from resisting God's will, but from embracing it. When we try to control everything, the outcome of our plans, the behavior of others, the timing of blessings, we wear ourselves down. We live in tension and fear, constantly afraid that if we stop holding on, everything will fall apart. But the truth is, some things only heal when we let them go. When you finally surrender that worry, that relationship, that dream, that pain, something beautiful happens. The burden shifts. The weight you've been carrying alone is lifted, because now it rests in God's hands. And suddenly, you begin to feel lighter, not because the problem vanished, but because your soul is no longer fighting against it. That is the sacred balance between strength and surrender. You do your part with faithfulness, and you leave the rest to God with trust. Think of a seed planted in the soil. It must break apart before new life can grow. That breaking, that surrender, is what allows strength to emerge. So it is with us. The very moments that feel like our undoing are often the moments when God is reshaping us for something new. A person who has learned to surrender to God does not lose hope when life changes course. They can say, even if my plans fail, I am still safe because I am in His will. That kind of peace cannot be shaken by circumstances. St. Paul wrote, "When I am weak, then I am strong." What a paradox. But that's the mystery of grace. The weaker we become in ourselves, the more room we give God to fill us with His power. If you have ever faced exhaustion, physical, emotional, or spiritual, and said, "I can't do this anymore," remember, that moment is not the end of your strength. It's the beginning of His. It's like a weary traveler collapsing at the base of a mountain, realizing they cannot climb any higher. And there, in the stillness, a hand reaches down, God's hand, lifting them, carrying them, step by step. That is divine strength born out of surrender. When we let go of control, we discover peace. When we stop insisting on our way, we find God's way. When we surrender, we are not becoming weaker. We are finally aligning with the greatest power in the universe: love. Surrender is also an act of humility. It's admitting that we don't have all the answers, that we can't fix everything by ourselves. It's acknowledging that we need God every day, not just in crisis, but in the ordinary quiet hours too. When your heart feels restless, whisper this prayer: Lord, I surrender. Strengthen me to accept what I cannot change, to act where you call me, and to trust that all things are in your hands. Those words are like medicine for the soul. They transform anxiety into calm, resistance into peace, fear into faith. The truth is, God never asks us to carry burdens He won't help us bear. He only asks that we trust Him enough to let Him help. So if you are facing something right now that feels too heavy, a loss, a waiting season, a painful uncertainty, pause. Take a deep breath. Say quietly, Lord, I surrender. Give me strength to trust you. Because sometimes the strongest prayer is not the one that demands, but the one that yields. And in that holy yielding, your heart will find rest, not because the storm ends, but because you've learned to rest in the one who commands the storm. That's the divine secret. Real strength comes not from standing taller, but from kneeling deeper. Finding hope in the midst of weakness. There are seasons in life when weakness becomes our constant companion. When we wake up already weary, when our prayers feel heavy and unanswered. When faith itself feels like a burden we can barely lift. In those seasons, hope can seem like a distant light flickering at the edge of darkness. But it is precisely in those moments that God whispers the most tender truth. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. That verse isn't a poetic comfort, it's a promise. It tells us that our weakness is not the end of the story. It's the place where God begins his greatest work. We often believe that God uses only the strong, the capable, the confident. But Scripture shows a different pattern. God called Moses, who doubted his speech; David, who was just a shepherd boy; Peter, who was impulsive and afraid; and Paul, who bore a thorn in the flesh. Each of them struggled, and yet, through their weakness, God's glory was revealed. Because when we are weak, we can no longer pretend to be our own Savior. We begin to rely not on ourselves, but on Him. And that shift, from self-dependence to God-dependence, is where real hope is born. Hope is not the absence of struggle. Hope is the flame that survives because of struggle. It is what tells us, yes, I am broken, but God is not done with me yet. When we feel weak, the enemy often whispers lies, that we are failures, that God has forgotten us, that nothing will ever change. But God's voice says something different. He says, I am with you always. He says, do not be afraid, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. Isaiah 43:1. Weakness does not disqualify us from God's love. It invites it closer. Like a parent who bends down to lift a tired child, God bends down to meet us in our fragility. He does not shame us for being weak. He delights in carrying us. Sometimes we confuse strength with independence. But in God's kingdom, strength means dependence, not on our own willpower, but on His unfailing grace. There's a story about a man who fell into a pit. People passed by, offering advice. One said, try climbing out. Another said, you must have done something wrong to fall in. But then Jesus came, looked into the pit, and climbed down to where the man was. He didn't just give advice, He gave Himself. That's what God does with us. He meets us in the pit of our weakness, not to condemn, but to lift us out. When Paul begged God to remove his thorn, the Lord did not take it away. Instead, He said, my grace is sufficient for you. Why? Because if Paul's weakness remained, so would his reliance on grace. And through that reliance, God's power shone brighter than Paul's abilities ever could. Sometimes the miracle is not that the pain disappears, but that the heart still believes in spite of it. That's what hope is. The courage to believe that even when the night is long, the dawn will come. If you're walking through a valley right now of sickness, loss, exhaustion, or uncertainty, know this. Your weakness is not a sign that you've failed. It's a sign that you're human and that God is near. Psalm 34 says, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Notice, He doesn't say the strong-hearted or the cheerful-hearted. He says the broken-hearted. God's comfort is not earned. It is given freely to those who need it most. When you find yourself too tired to pray, remember that even your silence can be prayer. When you have no words left, the Spirit Himself intercedes for you with groanings too deep for words. You are never abandoned, even in your emptiness. Heaven is listening. Hope is not something you must manufacture. It is something you receive. It's like the sunrise. You don't create it. You simply wait for it. You trust that it will come, even when the horizon still looks dark. That's what faith in weakness looks like. It doesn't always shout triumphantly. Sometimes it just whispers, I still believe. And that whisper is enough to move mountains in God's eyes. The truth is, God never wastes a single tear. Every hardship, every weakness, every night of struggle, they are all part of the story He is writing. A story not of defeat, but of redemption. You may not see it now, but someday, when you look back, you will see that the times you felt the weakest were actually the times He was carrying you the most. So, if today you feel small, weary, or broken, take heart. Your weakness is not your enemy. It's the very place where grace is born. Say softly, Lord, in my weakness, be my strength. In my sorrow, be my hope. In my fear, be my peace. I trust that even this moment, this struggle, this heartache, is held in your loving will. And as you pray those words, remember this: the light of hope never fades in a heart that keeps turning toward God. Because even in weakness, He is strong. Even in darkness, He is near. And even when everything feels lost, His love still holds you. The power of faithful endurance. It's a word we often overlook, but in the life of faith, it's one of the most beautiful and powerful virtues. It's not loud or dramatic. It doesn't draw attention. But endurance is what keeps a soul alive when everything else feels broken. Faithful endurance means choosing to keep walking. Even when the road is long, even when the night is cold, even when you feel like you have nothing left. It's the quiet courage that whispers, I will not give up, because God has not given up on me. The Bible is filled with examples of endurance. Job sat in ashes, stripped of everything, yet still declared, though He slay me, yet will I trust Him. Job 13:15. Joseph endured betrayal, slavery, and prison. But he never lost faith that God's hand was still upon his life. And Jesus Himself endured the cross, not because it was easy, but because of love. Hebrews 12 says, for the joy set before Him, He endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. That verse reveals the heart of endurance. It looks beyond the pain to the promise. You see, endurance is not about pretending you're okay. It's about trusting that the story isn't over yet. It's knowing that behind every hardship, there is a hidden grace, that even when the storm rages, God is still steering the boat. When you pray, Lord, give me strength to bear this suffering with patience, you are asking for the gift of endurance, not to escape pain immediately, but to walk through it faithfully. There's something holy about people who endure with quiet faith. You can see it in their eyes, not the absence of pain, but the presence of peace. They may be carrying a heavy cross, but they've learned how to carry it with grace. Endurance transforms suffering into sanctification. It takes what could have destroyed us and turns it into something that refines us. Like gold tested in fire, endurance purifies the heart, teaching it to love more deeply, to trust more freely, to hope more firmly. James 1 says, blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love Him. This is not just a future reward. It's also a present blessing. Every time you choose to endure, you grow stronger in spirit. Every time you keep faith in the dark, your soul shines brighter. But endurance is not just about surviving hardship. It's about remaining faithful in it. It's about choosing love when bitterness seems easier, choosing prayer when silence feels safer, choosing forgiveness when resentment calls louder. Endurance is the daily yes to God, even when you feel like saying no. There will be days when you want to quit, when you think, what's the point? I've prayed and waited and nothing has changed. But endurance whispers, wait a little longer, God is still working. It reminds us that every seed must endure darkness before it sprouts into life. Every sunrise is born out of a long night. Every resurrection follows a crucifixion. Sometimes endurance feels invisible, no applause, no recognition. But heaven sees. God sees. Every tear, every quiet act of faith, every moment you chose to keep going. None of it is wasted. Faithful endurance also has the power to inspire others. When people see you enduring with grace, not denying your pain, but trusting through it, they glimpse the strength of God at work within you. You become a living testimony that hope is real, that faith is alive, that love never fails. Think of the elderly woman who still prays every morning, even after losing her family. Think of the father who works tirelessly for his children, though he is weary. Think of the young believer who clings to faith despite rejection. These are the quiet saints of endurance, people who reflect the patience and faithfulness of Christ himself. And here's a sacred truth. Endurance is not something you have to generate on your own. It's a gift of grace. God himself sustains those who trust him. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." When you endure with faith, you are not walking alone. God walks beside you, step by step. He strengthens your heart when it trembles. He lifts you when you stumble. He pours new courage into your weary spirit. Endurance may not remove the cross, but it transforms the way you carry it. You no longer see it as a punishment, but as a participation in the mystery of Christ's love. So if you find yourself in a season of trial, remember this: endurance is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of love. It's what keeps your soul rooted when everything else shakes. It's what allows grace to grow where pain once was. Say quietly, "Lord, teach me to endure with faith. When my heart grows weary, remind me of your promises. When I want to give up, remind me that you never gave up on me." Because faithful endurance does not end in defeat. It ends in glory. And one day, when you look back from heaven's side, you'll see that every step, every tear, every act of trust led you closer to God's heart. So keep walking, keep believing, keep enduring. For those who endure in faith will one day hear the words every heart longs for. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Conclusion: living with strength, trust, and hope in God's loving will. When we look back on this prayer, Lord, in my weakness of body and my weary spirit, I come to you, my strength and my hope. Give me the strength to bear this suffering with patience. Give me the confidence that all things are in your loving will. Amen. We realize it is not merely a prayer of asking, but of transformation. It is the kind of prayer that changes how we see life itself. It teaches us that strength is not found in avoiding pain, but in walking through it with faith. That hope is not born in the absence of trials, but in trusting that even in the darkest valleys, God walks beside us. Each line of this prayer is like a step on a spiritual journey, from weakness to surrender, from surrender to peace, from peace to confidence, and from confidence to love. It is a gentle reminder that even when our strength fails, God's love never does. We often think of prayer as a way to change our circumstances, but more often, it is the way God changes us. Through prayer, we discover that the same hands that form the stars are the hands that hold us through every trial. When you whisper, "Lord, I come to you in my weakness," you are not showing failure, you are showing faith. Because to admit that you are weak is to open your heart to the one who is strong. The world teaches us to hide our pain, to put on a brave face. But God invites us to bring our pain to Him, to lay it bare, to let His healing touch mend what the world cannot. Through every section of this reflection, one truth stands clear. God's strength is not something distant or abstract. It is deeply personal. It meets us in our everyday struggles, in the quiet tears no one sees, in the fears we cannot put into words, in the exhaustion that weighs our hearts. Faith doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means that even when life remains hard, we are never alone. Think of a candle burning in a dark room. The darkness does not extinguish it. In fact, the darker the room, the brighter the flame appears. So it is with faith. It shines most beautifully, not when everything is easy, but when everything is hard, and yet we still choose to trust. When we ask for the strength to bear suffering with patience, we are not asking to feel nothing. We are asking for the grace to feel everything, yet still believe in God's goodness through it all. Patience in suffering is not passive endurance. It is active faith. It is the courage to keep walking when you do not see the end of the road, trusting that the one who guides you will not let you be lost. Life will test us in many ways. There will be times of abundance and times of emptiness, moments of laughter and moments of grief. But through them all, God remains the same, steadfast, faithful, unchanging. The seasons may shift, but His love does not. To trust in His loving will is to believe that even the things we do not understand can somehow be turned into blessings. It does not mean every pain is good, but it means that every pain can become good when placed in God's hands. When we give our suffering to Him, it is transformed. Our tears water the soil of compassion. Our struggles shape our empathy. Our trials carve out space in our hearts where grace can dwell. And when we finally emerge from hardship, maybe not with all the answers, but with a deeper peace, we realize that what God gave us was not always the miracle we asked for, but the strength we needed. That is why this prayer ends not in despair, but in confidence. Give me the confidence that all things are in your loving will. Confidence, not arrogance, but a quiet assurance that nothing is wasted in God's plan. Even our mistakes, our delays, our heartbreaks, He can use them to bring about something greater. Sometimes, what feels like a detour is actually the path that leads us home. Sometimes, what feels like loss is the clearing that makes room for new life. The wisdom of this prayer lies in its simplicity. It does not demand explanations. It asks for faith. It does not fight the storm. It seeks peace within it. It does not cling to control. It rests in divine care. And that is the essence of Christian living, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of grace. If you are weary today, remember this. Your weakness does not repel God, it draws Him closer. If you are afraid, know this. Faith is not the absence of fear, but the choice to trust God despite it. If you feel broken, understand this. In God's hands, even broken pieces can shine like stained glass under His light. Every saint who has ever walked this earth has known weakness, doubt, and pain. Yet, through endurance, they discovered something unshakable, that love is stronger than sorrow, and hope is greater than fear. So, what does this prayer ask of us in daily life? To keep coming to God, honestly, humbly, consistently. To bring Him our weariness, our struggles, our questions. To let His strength replace our own, His peace fill our anxiety, His purpose guide our uncertainty. When you wake up tired, say, Lord, be my strength. When you feel lost, say, Lord, guide me. When you feel burdened, say, Lord, I surrender this to you. These are not just words. They are anchors that hold your soul steady in the waves. Because no matter what happens, joy or pain, gain or loss, the greatest truth remains: you are loved by God. Not for your strength, not for your perfection, but simply because you are His. That love is your strength. That love is your peace. That love is your home. And when the night feels long and your heart trembles with uncertainty, whisper once more, Lord, I trust that all things are in your loving will. Then rest, not because the storm is gone, but because your soul is safe in His hands. Amen.